Yes, a very good evening and many thanks for staying with us right here on NTV Uganda. My name is Rami Busiku and I come before you with a very pertinent conversation. Registration of customary land in Uganda. What are the emerging issues and what are the emerging opportunities for our citizens within this dear country of ours, the Pearl of Africa, Uganda? Approximately 70% of all Ugandans in this country hold land under the undocumented customary land tenure system. That is number one. But then the Constitution recognizes customary land tenure system under Article 237 that allows the occupants full ownership rights like those under the freehold tenure. So that is one of the good news. The Land Act, Cap 227, also allows, yes, the conversion of customary land all the way to freehold. Yes, but then not so many people do have this information. And that's why we've come before you with this major conversation on registration of the customary land. Yes, so that you can secure full ownership rights. The Land Act actually provides three options. The formation of communal land associations. That is number one, to ensure management at the communal level. It also allows for the acquisition of certificates of customary ownership, what you may call CCOs in that regard. It also calls for the for the conversion of customary land tenure system all the way to freehold. Yes, but that is very, very expensive. You'll need some 2.5 million shillings all the way to 5 million shillings. But then for the certificate of customary ownership, it is very, very cheap. You can convert your land by using a little less than 200,000 Uganda shillings. So I have over 5 panelists in studio today. 3 of them are going to be with me in studio and 2 are going to be via Zoom. We have Professor Moses Musinguzi. He is the Dean School of the Built Environment that is at Makerere University. He's here with us. We also have Francis Birungi. She is the Executive Director, Uganda Community Association for Women and Children's Welfare. We also do have His Royal Highness Stephen Drani. He represents the Madi Cultural Institution from Ajumani and Moyo districts. Thank you very much for joining us. And via Zoom, we have Mr. Simon Peter Mwesije. There he is. He is representing United Nations Human Settlement Program. He's a land tenure advisor with whom we are going to be also expounding more on the land registration issue, customary land system right here in Uganda. Thank you, sir, for joining us. Last but not least, on the online via Zoom, we are also going to be joined by Naomi Kabanda. She is the acting director of land management in the Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development. She shall be joining us also via Zoom to compound more on the regulatory framework as far as customary land system is concerned right here in Uganda. Let's kick off with you, Professor Moses Musinguzi from Makerere University. Let's kick off with a basic question. What is customary land tenure system as we speak right now?
Thank you, moderator. This is an important question. What is customary land and what is customary tenure? By customary land or customary tenure, we are referring to the type of ownership of land where the rules are derived from the traditions and the customs of the indigenous people.
That is customary land.
That's customary land.
All right.
Actually, when we talk about land, land is land. When you look at land, you will not say this is customary land, this is Mairo. Land remains land. But these are the theoretical and administrative procedures that we have included so that we are able to manage the land for prosperity and for the betterment of our lives.
And I also understand before the colonialists came in 1900, all land in Uganda was customary.
Sure, actually, all land in Africa was customary. So the strictest form of customary tenure is communal ownership of land, whereby a clan or a community owns land and the rights for allocation, use, and even transfer are vested in the community. That is customary tenure. But over time, customary tenure has been evolving, it has been changing, and we see that the stronghold of the customary leadership is really giving way to families and finally maybe to individuals. But that's a slow process, and it's a process that actually is happening everywhere in Africa.
Let's take a look at that evolution of customary land ownership, because in 1962, yes, our government did allow for the single ownership of land, but they still did have the power to come and say, please vacate, we want to do something here. So what are the securities that come with customary ownership right now?
You see, maybe let me begin with a picture of the African continent. First of all, as you have mentioned properly, is that customary tenure was the original indigenous tenure in Africa.
Indeed.
But when the colonialists came, there was a thinking that customary tenure is a very primitive way of holding land. And the colonialists really had in mind the type of tenure systems which they had at home. So because of that, most of the laws which were enacted during the colonial period did not favor customary tenure. In fact, in many laws, customary tenure was non-existent. Instead, you would have other tenure systems, and mainly freehold. Under freehold, basically, you own the land for forever, in perpetuity. And this is the same scenario as customary tenure. But now, around the 1990s, there was a realization that actually the problems on customary tenure are not to do with the tenure itself. The problems on customary tenure are to do with the neglect. Government neglected customary tenure, and yet customary tenure accounts for more than 90%. Let's look at Uganda. You have correctly mentioned that actually more than 70% of the land in Uganda is under customary tenure. But if you look closely, the reality, it is more than 90%, because we always say that most of the central region is under Mairo. But where are the who are the Vivanja holders? These Vivanja holders are customary, actually, they have customary rights. And yet, these customary rights are not documented, they are not known, and they're neglected. So, if we are to develop Uganda as a country, using land as a resource, definitely we must look at customary tenure, and that's why you have this kind of discussion.
And let's talk about the Land Act in 1998. Of course, it did change everything, because it did allow for the conversion of customary land all the way to freehold. Was it a game changer, and does it continue to be a game changer?
Yeah, first of all, the 1995 Constitution is where the Land Act actually drives its powers. In 1995, customary tenure was included as a formal tenure system. This was after the 1997 Land Reform Decree actually abolished customary tenure. So this was an attempt to recognize really the customary tenure, and as I've mentioned, this was a wave across the entire Africa. Now,
so it was a reaction to the 1975 decree by Amin, to abolish customary land tenure. All right.
But now, in dealing with customary tenure, even in other parts of Africa, the thinking has been, let's slowly formalize customary tenure. But then, because we don't understand these traditions and customs, let's be cautious. Let's not give it like the full accreditation like we do for freehold. So the provision in the Land Act of 1998 is that precautionary measure. We don't understand fully customary tenure, so let's give it formal recognition, but then let's open a window in case somebody wants to move to the other tenure system, which we know, let it be there.
So let's talk about the three options that are offered by the Land Act, especially KEP 227. Let's talk about those three options: conversion of land to from customary land tenure all the way to freehold. The three options, what are they? In the Land Act,
there are options. The options maybe you're talking about are for the
formation of community land associations.
There is you can have a communal land association. A communal land association may not be necessary for customary. It can be for any other purpose, whereby a group of people form themselves into an association, and that association can do many other things, including ownership and management of land. Then the certificate of customary ownership is also created under the 1998 Act, where you can get a certificate of ownership, but then the rules for transfer, ownership, and use of land are still governed by the community where you are. Then you can also have a trust. You can trustship, whereby a community, you can have few members of the community, and you register the land as a trust. So I think those are the three options. But then there are other options which are not in the Land Act but in the land policy, and these ones apply to the minor tenure. Because when we talk about customary tenure, sometimes we tend to forget about the vivanja holders, and these are also customary. They have customary rights. So there are also options under the land policy for really regionalizing the occupancy rights on minor tenure.
All right, let's also bring in Francis Birungi. She is the Executive Director, Uganda Community-Based Association for Women and Children's Rights, Welfare, rather. Thank you for joining us, Francis Birungi. Let's talk about the existing gender issues in relation to access to land under the customary land tenure.
Okay, thank you. Mainly the issue of gender in relation to customary land tenure is basically from the fact that women that are under customary land tenure have weaker rights compared to their male counterparts. And that really contravenes what our constitution provides in terms of equality between men and women in regard to ownership, but also the ability to exercise their land rights. So this issue of women having weaker rights under customary land tenure really stems from our system, the system under which Professor has mentioned. Under customary land tenure, land is governed under is governed by the traditions and customs of that particular area, and we see that in many of these societies, especially under patriarchal societies like in Uganda, for example, land as a resource is under this custom, this traditional custom, is passed on through the male lineage, is passed on from father to son, for example. Or it's you know, so in that way we see that the men or the boys are handed, the society hands them stronger rights on land, or it hands them primary rights on land. Whereas women and girls have weaker rights in the sense that they hold secondary rights. And these secondary rights only come in play through a relationship that they have with a male counterpart. For example, a relationship between a father and a daughter. So the daughter, you know, has rights on that land, but they are dependent on that relationship with that male who is the father.
Meaning if you break up,
meaning that in
you're
case that relationship changes, for example, through marriage, or if a relationship between man and woman breaks through divorce or separation or death, then those relationships, I mean, the relationship that the woman has on that land changes. So this really means that women's rights on land under customary land tenure are really generally weak because of the fact that they are not, the society does not provide the primary rights on land. And by meaning, what I mean by weak is the fact that many times women are able to use. You know, they can dig, they can, you know, farm the land, they can live on the land, but they are not able to enjoy the whole bundle of rights or the whole spectrum of rights, which is provided for by our constitution. They can use, they can, you know, farm on the land and so forth, but they cannot make decisions on this land. For example, if this land has to be transferred or to sell the land or to, you know, they cannot make decisions at all on this land. Or they also don't have ownership rights. They don't hold this land in perpetuity. The owner of this land is the one who was, you know, passed on this land primarily by probably the male, the father, and so forth. So because of that, we see that many times women face a lot of violence on this land. And this violence is in terms of disinheritance. For example, when the marriage breaks, when that relationship between a man and a woman stops or fails, then they are disinherited, chased away from this land. There is land grabbing. There is gender-based violence. There is a lot of violence related to land that comes in because of the fact that the rights that they hold are really weak. And this really comes from our patriarchal system. So
is lack of knowledge also partly to blame in this?
Yes, and it's one of the main issues, lack of knowledge on the rights that they hold as equal human beings. Many of the women that we have on customary land, but also on other tenure systems, don't know that they have equal rights. And it's because of the system in which we are all brought up in, because we are taught that It's the man who makes decisions on the land. It's the man that owns the land. So you don't know that actually you're equal human beings. You also have rights to make decisions on this land and so forth. And many other issues also arise, but mainly because of the system. For example, lack of access to justice. Yeah, women are not able to access justice when they are violated in the forms that I have just mentioned. And this also comes very strongly from the fact that the traditional systems or the local justice systems are weak, are not strong enough to be able to support women that are violated. Some may be strong but have been weakened by the laws or the systems that are in place that are weakening, for example, the traditional systems. If you look at the traditional systems, most of them are actually supportive, but they have been weakened over time. So women really are challenged in a number of ways to be able to fully exercise the whole bundle of rights on customary land. And this is mainly because of the patriarchal system.
Indeed, Francis Birungi, are there any gaps in the regulatory framework? Because I'm looking at Article 237 of the Constitution that allows full occupancy rights for whomever is having any kind of documentation for the same land. So what seems to be the problem when it comes to the law?
What really seems to be the problem is I should say, lack of implementation, because the laws that we have are really gender responsive. They are progressive. They are very
just
clear.
Implementation.
If you look at our Constitution, if you look at the Land Act, if you look at the National Land Policy, our legislative framework is very gender responsive and very progressive. The challenge that we have is in terms of implementation, putting these laws that are well written in practice. And that's why you see that someone else who has not been in Uganda, for example, if they read our laws, they would think it's all well and good for women in Uganda. Not until you get on ground and you see that actually women are suffering every day. And this is because implementation for these laws is lacking, and that comes from a number of issues. For example, the lack of capacity for the land administrators to provide gender responsive land administration. It can also be due to lack of awareness of knowledge about these rights, like you mentioned. So when women don't know their rights, they are not able to assert these rights. They cannot be able to make sure that they participate in some of these land processes. For example, the land registration processes that are ongoing. If women don't know that they have a right to participate, if women don't know that it's their right to, to have equal rights with men, they will not engage in these processes. So it is that is the gap, that the implementation and the enforcement is really lacking, but the laws are okay.
And you feel like the acquisition of certificates of customary ownership are the game changer because they allow for the inclusion of more than 5 family members, even 100 people on that document? Yes,
I think this creates a really big opportunity for women. And I think for us, as my organization, UCOBAC, we have piloted the provision of certificates of customary ownership at community level, and we have seen that this really works for women because first and foremost it provides for joint ownership. So you can either have a certificate of customary ownership as a clan through the clan associations. You can have it as a family, but also as an individual. So these are different opportunities that women have, and we know that since our customs do not hand land to the woman individually, it's because they only have that relationship through, they own land through a relationship with a man. Then this helps because they can own land, with their husbands, with their families. So it's really one opportunity, a very great opportunity. And we have seen on ground that it has really worked for women. More women are having their land registered through the certificates of customary ownership than it is with other forms of titling, like the freehold titles, for example, because this opportunity is there. But also the certificates of customary ownership has adapted fit-for-purpose land administration processes
and technologies.
Or technologies, which really are more affordable and accessible for women. For example, we do not, in providing certificates of customary ownership or in registering land, we do not employ very high-tech digital technologies that are expensive. We do not do the high-tech surveying, but we do apply some tools that are pro-poor, that are more accessible, that are more affordable for women. So you mentioned that it would cost, for example, $200,000 8,000 or less. In the communities where we work in Ajumani and in Pader, a woman and her family, for example, would only have to spend 10,000. That is really affordable. But we see that even with that, the women are struggling. The families are struggling to raise 10,000. So if you talk about bringing, if you talk about, registering land using the traditional approaches and methodologies, then you leave out a number of women and girls because they will not be able to participate effectively in this process. They cannot afford these processes.
Francis Birungi is the Executive Director, Uganda Community-Based Association for Women and Children's Rights. Let's also talk about the roles of the cultural leaders in this regard in ensuring access to land rights for the women. We have His Royal Highness Stephen Drani. He is the Paramount Chief for the Madi Cultural Institution in Ajumani and Moyo districts. Well, thank you for joining us once again, Stephen Drani.
Well, thank you very much.
So, Your Royal Highness, would like to understand what are the roles of the cultural leaders in extending full ownership rights to the women?
Well, first of all, because the traditional leaders are the pinnacle of the social settings of our customary institutions, and them being the custodians as well of these lands, they have a lot to do with ensuring equity and justice in regard to women's land rights protection. And so there are lots of things we do apart from the other things that would go with it, ensuring that women are fully registered on titles, and where there's widows or single persons, and we ensure that their rights to land are registered by these individuals, and where there's disabled children, we make sure that their land rights are not disenfranchised, and they are registered duly as well for these issues and the issuance of titles and stuff like that. Basically, the role of traditional leaders in this also stretches out into the peace building, and we see of late it has been thought, but this is a perception. It's not a cultural thing. It's a perception. There's a perception, a misperception, a misconception that land belongs to men. But I would ask anyone historically to bring me proof to tell me that this land belongs to men. Actually, the land belongs to women, but it's protected by men. You understand?
Or the land is being used most by the women, but it's
supposed to be protected
by
by men for all women. Understand? And it was of all that if I am, for example, I'm a Madi, right? If there were no women in Madi sub-region, I'd leave the whole of West Nile land and migrate to wherever there's a woman, and I would settle for 100 by 100 meters or 50 by 100 meters if there's a woman in Karamoja.
Right.
And I'd leave. Basically, our issue, our place in land issues was about protecting the land for the use of the women. And that's why today, even in today's society, you find that 80% of our agriculture is done by women, which brings in more than 75% of the national budget. And this agriculture is done by women. And so why is it that when it comes to land allocation and land rights recognition, that women always fall behind these things? It's a social injustice that is not cultural, but it has been superimposed by years of superimposing ourselves over the rights of women and children and orphans and so on and so forth. You find in societies, for example, in our societies, you find uncles selling off lands, and yet there are children behind because they are the eldest children at that time. That land then belong to them? Automatically doesn't. This land belongs to everybody. This is the social norms and customary norms of our people. But nevertheless, the question of this, of us needing to place the land into the hands of the women, is to ensure their security in our land tenure system. Otherwise, if you leave it to the men of now, today, you're actually killing the men, because they'll go and blow it and
probably turned to liquor and all other forms and stuff like that. But our land policy is a great gift to us as Ugandans that came out in 2013. And at least it's got a whole list of things that we need to be doing as traditional leaders. That it recognizes traditional management, land management institutions for decision making. It asks courts to go by decisions of traditional
And
management.
also asks for the issuance of the certificate of title of customary ownership vis-a-vis the certificate of customary ownership that is being asked for by the Land Act. Is there any difference between the two? The certificate of title of customary ownership and the certificate of customary ownership.
Well, I don't really think there's much of a difference, because the one are the same. It's just the words used to play around with. But the issue.
But they say the second one, the certificate of title
Why
of
should
customary
someone have to
ownership,
tell you,
is backed by the state.
why should someone have to tell you that one mango coming from another tree, from the same tree, is better than this mango of same weight and same ripeness? We understand. This
Yes.
is what Professor was saying, in that we have to decolonize our words, the words we use for our stuff as Africans.
Yes.
You understand? We have to really, that's the biggest problem with African stuff. Because right now we can talk about customary land until the cows come back home, and still the moon falls from the sky. But we don't understand the concept that customary land is the land tenure system that has existed since civilization of the world, because civilization started in Africa.
Indeed.
And it has been protected. And it's not something of the 1800s when colonialists came. You understand? Because all these other systems, whether Milo, freehold, leasehold, these other land tenure systems were brought here by colonialists.
Indeed.
You understand? So if we don't decolonize our words,
There's a need to change the
what
wording.
is, and because our identity rests in the psychology that is inferred to our minds by the words we use.
Yes.
You understand? So that is very important. But nevertheless, what I'm trying to say, it was actually in 2009 that the heads of state of the African continents met together. That's including our beloved president. That they met together and made a declaration against poverty and poverty reduction. And they chose to use the frameworks and guidelines on land policy in Africa to cause about the change to come. And then in 2011, there was a sitting by the ministers of these governments in Nairobi. There's a Nairobi Declaration on large-scale land-based investments that led to also traditional leaders when was taken to Ghana in Accra, and we made certain declarations of ensuring, for example, that 30% of the land is in the hands of women by 2025. I believe by the grace of God, I'm going to achieve that and surpass that.
Amen.
Because the registration we're doing is neither for men nor for women, but for both. You understand? You cannot register land if you have a wife, if you have a daughter, as a singular entity. You have to put all of them on the title. And for you to sell that land, you have to ask each and every person that is on that title.
One of the merits of the CCO.
Right. So you cannot do a lot of these things that are very unequal. They
Things that would have been possible if you had
repugnant.
a freehold title.
Right.
Because you don't need to inquire from the lady.
Even in a freehold title, you have to ask your spouse.
But I heard that you don't have to under the
No,
freehold. You
not
can just do
only
it.
if it belongs to you, but if you're married, then the
Yes.
sanctity of marriage is recognized.
Yes.
You understand? In that
Indeed.
relationship.
Yes.
Because the security of the wife you have and the children is also secured by that title. Their rights in that title. So it's not just an easy thing to get out of. But basically, yes, in terms of protecting the rights of women, it is a must, and
Indeed.
I believe all traditional leaders.
And
out there.
your Royal Highness Stephen Johnny, we understand that you are one of the few enlightened cultural leaders who are actually accepting the registration of customary land. But some of them are resisting. Why?
Well, I don't know if I'm the only enlightened one, but
One of the few enlightened cultural leaders.
possibly one of the few that is doing it.
Indeed.
There's talk, and then there's walking the talk.
Indeed.
You understand me? And it's actually a privilege. These guys should be doing this stuff.
Indeed.
Because they are gazetted. They're doing we are doing all this work against being gazetted. You understand? Well, we spoke to GLTN when I was in Ethiopia. We brought them here. They started their work in Kisoro. I spoke to And then Germany, I spoke to Cadastre Foundation. They started their work in Hoima. They're doing all these things. If I hadn't spoken to all these people, we would still be stuck. But basically, what I would like to say is that our government, Uganda, is wonderful in the Pan-African attitude toward the people in Africa, and especially toward the Ugandans. And also when it comes to land, you see now in Madi sub-region, just to change the topic a bit, we have something we call Opipa Koka, which means grabbing the legs of the chief and beseeching his protection. Okay? This causes other situations within the customary land registration. These people might not be able to trace back their ancestry to that particular geographical location, but then that Opipa Koka would give them rights, equal rights, to the services and the rights over land as any other person that would be. And the Opipa Koka has not got no time. You can say that your grandfather came and did the Opipa Koka, but then what about yourself? Opipa Koka can start tomorrow or the day after. So there's also the tendency to look after the rights of migrants, and hence that's why we look after thousands of refugees in West Nile, because we gave our land, you understand, for the looking after refugees and stuff like that. So there are many issues pertaining to land registration and especially customary rights, but we want to protect the people because the growth of Africa and our economy, all economies and things pertaining to social economic activities, they take place on land. And let me tell you, the land in Africa is so much on demand by these Western, Eastern, or Northern so-called investors, even Southern African investors, so-called. But we don't have the land. The one thing we know is that the population grows, and it's growing. When the president, I believe, when they came in, was about 16 million, 14 to 16 million. Now we are 40-odd million. You understand? That's how quickly it takes for the population to burst. And tomorrow we are going to be even more, because the population is consisting of young people of childbearing age.
So we need to ensure food security by securing women's rights.
Not just food security, that access to land is equitable for the youth, for the older people. It's not older people making decisions to sell land, but the futures of the youth has to be considered, of the women, of the disabled, and every boy and girl that lives in our community and society, including migrants.
His Royal Highness Stephen Drani, he is the Paramount Chief for the Madi Cultural Institution that is in Adjumani District and Moyo District. And let's also get some of the submissions from our development partners. That is UN Habitat Global Land Tool Network, that is GLTN. That is Simon Peter Mwesije via Zoom. He is a land tenure advisor under the United Nations Human Settlement Program. Would like to know, a very good evening, Simon Peter Mwesije. Can you hear me?
Yes, I do. Good evening.
Yes, we'd like to know why the development partners decided to choose registration of customary land to the customary land tenure system. Why did you focus on this and not the conversion of customary land all the way to freehold? Why did you focus on this issuance of certificates of customary ownership? Why did you focus on that?
Thank you. Before I answer the question, let me take this opportunity to greet the viewers of NTV Uganda, the panelists, and all joining the discussion through Zoom. Happy Labour's Day to you all. Let me also thank our partners, Makerere University, Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development, and the management of NTV Uganda for organizing this important dialogue. To your question, as already mentioned and highlighted, in Uganda, a significant proportion of the population still access land through customary land tenure system, with land rights which are still largely undocumented and out of the formal land administration system. And it has also just been emphasized that women are most affected by tenure insecurity. Land conflicts, land fragmentation are also increasingly high. Registration of customary land rights and improving its administration is extremely very important to address these issues so that communities living on land held under customary land tenure can focus on how to put their land to productive use for addressing food security, investment, and social inclusion. Good land and natural resource governance is a prerequisite for achieving social and economic transformation. Therefore, we cannot achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, the New Urban Agenda, and other global and regional frameworks without addressing the pressing land challenges. It has also been argued that customary tenure in sub-Saharan Africa is the recipe for underdevelopment, and thus a major cause of the region's untold levels of rural poverty. But we also know that projects to convert customary tenure to private freehold have failed miserably most of the time. Let us also recognize that due to the emerging social and economic pressures on land, the flexible, negotiable rules characteristic of customary tenure system can be manipulated by individuals seeking power and control over land. What we see is also an increasing recognition that customary tenure is not the problem, and it should be allowed to evolve to accommodate changing social, cultural, and economic conditions. Therefore, as part of this evolution in Uganda, since 1998, the law provides for instruments to register and secure land rights under customary land tenure system, namely the certificate of customary ownership. The law also provides that the registration should take place at the sub-county closer to the communities. This ensures the cost of registration is much lower and affordable by the community. The challenge, however, and this has also been highlighted earlier, is the slow implementation of these legal provisions. The Global Land Tool Network, as facilitated by UN Habitat in partnership with Government of Uganda and other land stakeholders, is supporting interventions to secure customary land rights through issuance of certificates of customary ownership in Mbale, Butaleja, Kabale, Kisoro, Pader, and Adjumani districts. Women land rights are given special attention in these processes. The aim is not only to ensure the outcomes, such as legal tenure documents issued are inclusive, but also that we target to transform social and cultural norms, and as well as economic empowerment for women and girls. On the aspect of social norms and dispute resolution, through alternative dispute resolution, we also work closely with cultural leaders. I'm very happy to see one of our long-standing partners, the Madi Paramount Chief, is part of this dialogue. We learned great lessons from these pilots for customary certification. The process we have learned is doable, affordable to the communities, and can be scaled so that everybody in Uganda can benefit. UN Habitat and the Global Land Tool Network are aiming to support Government of Uganda to reach the target of 2 million customary land certificates over the coming 5 years. This will be achieved based on strong collaboration with all development partners and civil society. So this discussion builds on these interventions, and I hope many of the lessons we have learned will be shared along by different panelists, and we are extremely grateful to our donors, the government of Germany, through the Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, the Netherlands Embassy in Uganda, and the government of Switzerland and Sweden. So without further ado, over to you back, the moderator. I look forward to an engaging continued discussion.
Simon Peter Mwesije would like to know how this certificate of customary ownership shall reduce the disputes we've been seeing on land. How shall it reduce on the land grabbing we've been seeing in communities?
Thank you very much. So one of the things that is happening is that during the process of registration of customary land, any disputes that come up are referred to an alternative dispute resolution mediation committee. So during this process, this committee is selected usually among existing mechanisms for dispute resolution, like cultural leaders, for instance, faith-based dispute resolution mechanism, and others. And so these disputes that come up, usually related to boundaries, but also to ownership, they are referred to this dispute resolution committee. And what we have learned is that actually alternative dispute resolution through mediation is an effective tool. Not only is it affordable, as I mentioned earlier, but it's also closer to the people because it utilizes, for instance, the local languages. People are able, the disputing parties are able to attend the dispute resolution and speak freely in their local languages. And so we find that this is actually very effective. And in fact, when you look at the resolution rate, the success rate for resolution of disputes, it's very high. Indeed. If you also compare with litigation.
All right, thank you very much, Simon Peter Mwesije. He is a land tenure advisor working with the United Nations Human Settlement Program, UN Habitat, the Global Land Tool Network, and they're doing the most. They did expedite a pilot project within Chisoro District all the way to Adjumani District, helping numerous people, over 20,000 beneficiaries, am I right, in securing their land rights within these two jurisdictions. So think about this. Expediting this whole process in all the 149 districts will go a long way in securing the land rights of the women, children, and all other vulnerable groups as a whole. Let's also bring in Naomi Kabanda. She is the acting... Yes, we shall talk to Naomi later on. We haven't established a very, very good feed via Zoom. Let's bring in Professor Moses Musinguzi. He is the Dean of the School of the Built Environment, Makerere University, to talk about why it is very, very significant for members of the community to embrace these certificates of customary ownership and why it has taken too long to register customary land. Professor Moses Musinguzi, why has it taken too long to register customary land? Yet it is so beautiful to register this land to ensure that we secure the land rights of the women, children, and other vulnerable groups.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I'm going to answer your question, but also to mention that really we've gathered a lot of information about customary land, and we have been doing studies with UN Habitat. We have also done studies with the Food Agriculture Organization of the United Nations and also German International Development Agency, specifically on customary tenure and also on regionalization of customary tenure. And you see, our estimate is that we have about 23 million parcels in Uganda. And right now we have only 1 million which is registered. And that's when you talk about all these land titles, Mairo, freehold, we are only at 1 million. And yet the target is one to achieve 24 million.
More needs to be done.
And 90% of the land is customary. So it means we must inevitably go into customary tenure.
So before we go to understanding why it has taken long to register customary land, let's talk about the emerging issues that are making it a slow process to implement the registration of customary land.
First of all, customary land, as I told you, was only recognized in 1998 in the Land Act.
Or 95, if you will, the Constitution.
The Constitution, deriving, which led into the Land Act. And until 2009, there was not even a single certificate of customary ownership. And the reason is there was no capacity to register customary tenure. If you recall the 1998 Land Act, there was a provision for the parish land committees. These would be committees at the parish level which would facilitate the adjudication, that is inspection of land and helping people to apply. But these institutions were not formed, but they are also not trained. So now in 2004, after realizing that it was going to be difficult to implement these reforms through the parish land committees, there was an amendment, and instead the committees were shifted to the sub-county level, and they are renamed area land committees. These area land committees still lacked capacity. If you go to sub-county, you not find any facilities, you not find a strong room for keeping these land records. The people are not trained, because the recorders who are supposed to be the sub-counties did not even know how a CCO looks like. And it is not until 2009 that initial efforts began to appoint these committees and also to start producing CCOs. So basically, I think what it did was mainly the issue of capacity. And that's why we came in as Makerere University in partnership with all these institutions, UCOBAC. We really did some feasibility studies, and these are the pilot areas that we are talking about.
In Tesoro and Adjumani.
Adjumani,
What are the findings?
Pader. The findings, one of them is that we are talking about 23 million parcels in Uganda, which need to be registered. Then we have found out that actually it is registerable. You know, when you talk, you are mentioning that traditional leaders, chiefs are against. I've not seen anywhere, because we have worked with His Royal Highness Rani, and we have worked in Teso, the issue. We don't find any resistance. So I don't know where this resistance is coming from. Maybe it is on paper. But where we have gone practical on ground, we don't find any resistance. What is necessary is to discuss with these people so that they understand really the benefits of registration of customary land.
It seems like one of the emerging issues that are coming and impeding the registration process, it's financial. There are no finances to actually expedite the registration of customary land. Number two, there are no structures to implement the registration of the same customary land. Would you agree?
Yes, that's what I was actually coming to. The second one is that really this land is registerable at a low cost. Actually, this research is not only in Uganda, it is worldwide. And the World Bank has a standard of about $10 per parcel. It should take $10 to register one parcel. In Uganda, that's about 40,000.
Indeed.
But through our research and the pilots that we have done, we have established that actually in Uganda, because of many other problems, it can go up to between 20 and 25 US dollars. Then we have also established that actually we need about 10 years to cover the entire country. And this will cost between 3 and 4 trillion Uganda shillings over 10 years. However,
we can get that money, Professor Musinguzi. We had 7 trillion shillings in unused loans, money we did not disburse. So we can really get this money. I think you did read that report from the Daily Monitor, 17 trillion Uganda shillings in undisbursed loans. So 3 trillion, we must be getting that
3
money.
trillion, if that one is injected into the land sector, we shall have the 23 million completed.
Yes,
and
go ahead.
Also,
Professor,
if we remain with the current approach, we are going to take 500 years to cover
500 years.
500 years to cover entire country. And remember, when you look at the Vision 2040, you look at the National Development Plan 3, we are looking at land as a resource that is going to help us to transform our economy from predominantly peasant to a modern prosperous economy. So without land, really,
conversion from subsistence to commercialized agriculture, and it can only be done by securing the rights of all, especially the vulnerable ones, women and children.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
So we just need only that. The technologies are there. We have tested the technologies. As Francis has already mentioned, we have low-cost technologies. We no longer use these complicated procedures. The laws already have been changed a little bit, although we might need more work. So everything is in place. We just need support, political support, so that...
What about mindset change? Because I'm looking at the Land Act of 1998, the National Land Policy of 2013, the Land Regulations Act of 2004, all these regulatory framework in place, but then you do still have a slow registration process. Only 10% of the households have actually converted customary land to the customary land tenure system. Why is it so slow? And why are we seeing customary land tenure system being negated in so many parts of this country? 10%.
Yes, as I've mentioned, you see the capacity problem. Because under the customary tenure registration, we are supposed to create the registries at the sub-county. And these sub-counties were not ready to hold the registries because, first of all, the people who were supposed to man the registries were not trained. They didn't know the law, they didn't know the procedure. Secondly, the facilities were not there at the sub-county.
Indeed.
So we have now established that actually you can also use technology to do registration at the sub-county, and this information can still be transmitted into the national information system.
Digital registration.
Yes, because...
Is it taking off?
It is taking off, and I hope the director, when she logs in, maybe she will be able to
Indeed, I wanted to
explain
get her on that. Go ahead.
Because the problem that we are seeing, the issue is one of the issues is, here you have the recorders at the sub-county who are registering customary land.
That's the sub-county chief.
Then you have the registrars at the ministry, they are registering freehold.
Indeed.
And these two are not linked up. So there is a possibility that I can give a CCO on the same piece of land, and then the freehold is issued on the same piece of land, and that brings confusion. So that's why we're saying these records which are generated by the recorders at the sub-county,
they need to be harmonized.
They should be harmonized so that the registrar can see them so as not to give a freehold on top of a CCO.
Of course, we would like to cover the whole country and ensure that all people who are under the customary land register that land under the customary land tenure system. So maybe we should give them reasons to do so, justification. Why is it important to register land under the customary land tenure system?
First of all, the customary tenure system is a very flexible way of registering land. You don't need to understand much more about land because you register land in the way that you know. If you have been using land, you know this is how you have been using it. If you have been transacting in land, you know the rules that have been there. Don't try to think about those complex modalities for registration, for transfer. Use what you know, and that is simplicity. Then you have these registries which are next to you at the sub-county. You don't need to go to the ministry headquarters. If you want to register or to do any transaction, you go to the sub-county. You don't need to spend a lot of money. Then number three, if you have a dispute, the committee that is going to help you to resolve the dispute is with you.
The area land committee.
Area land committee, you have the traditional leaders, you have the AROCs and other people around. And you don't need actually to hire a lawyer. No, you use the justice, you know,
quick mediation at the communal level.
Quick mediation at the community level. You can even do dispute resolution in your own language.
Amazing.
Because sometimes, we are educated, but sometimes these legal terminologies confuse us.
Indeed.
You need a lawyer to actually help you to interpret. But these people at the grassroots, can they afford a lawyer?
I understand.
They don't. So customary tenure has simplified everything to make it very easy and possible for the people at the grassroots to register their land, and even be able to utilize it in the way that they know and understand. Professor
Moses Musinguzi is the Dean School of the Built Environment at Makerere University. Well, of course, even you on social media, you can engage and, you know, put in your 2 cents to this discussion. Social media questions are, should customary land be registered and why? That's one of the questions that we have on Facebook, Twitter, and you can also get us live on YouTube. Why should should customary land be registered and why? We want to know your reasons. And number 2, will registration of customary land using the certificates of customary ownership CCOs reduce eviction of the poor on land? If not, Welcome back and many thanks for staying with us right here on NTV Uganda. We are still talking about the customary land tenure system. With me are very intelligent panelists. I have the Dean of Makerere University, that is the Dean School of the Built Environment, Makerere University, Professor Moses Musinguzi. He's not alone. We are also having Francis Birungi. She is the Executive Director, Uganda Community-Based Association for Women and Children's Rights. Also, His Royal Highness Stephen Droni. He is the Paramount Chief for the Madi tribe that is in Ajumani and Moyo districts. We also have via Zoom Naomi Kabanda. She is the acting... No, before we go to Naomi, we have Mr. Simon Peter Mwesije. He is a land tenure advisor, United Nations Human Settlement Program. But what about Naomi Kabanda? I would also like to talk to her later on via Zoom. We haven't established a live video link from which we can be able to speak to her on what government is doing and what kind of policies are in place to ensure protection to many people within this country. Let me engage Francis Birungi, the Executive Director, Uganda Community-Based Association for Women and Children's Rights, on the gender-sensitive conversation. Right. How do our laws or policies, Francis Birungi, ensure that women's land rights under the customary land tenure system are promoted or protected specifically in regard to land registration?
Yeah, like I said before, the laws that we have in place are really gender responsive and advance gender equality. And across the board, if you look at our constitution, it provides that women and men have equal rights to own property, to hold property, including land. The Land Act is very clear about that and also provides for spousal consent, specifically on matrimonial property, but also outlaws all discriminatory norms and practices that discriminate against women. The National Land Policy also provides for gender equality. We also have family laws in place. For example, the Succession Act, which was recently passed into law in Parliament, awaiting the President's accession. But we have that really protects inheritance rights for women and girls. And a process has been in place to try and reform or to review this law to make sure that it's gender responsive, because the old law that we had was really not gender sensitive. It was really contradicting the provisions in the Constitution, whereby women and girls were not being given equal rights to inherit property. But now we have these reviews that have been done in the Succession Act. So literally we have very good and progressive laws that promote. Our challenge probably is around the Marriage Act that is specifically aimed at protecting the rights of women in the union of marriage, women and husbands as well in the union of marriage. But for a long time, this has been shelved. It's something that we have not been successful to bring on board, but it's high time that we did, so that we have really a whole spectrum of laws that really are pro-women, pro-men and women in terms of their ability to exercise the full bundle of rights on land. But just want to mention an issue that many times when we look at the issues that are around, for example, the women's inability to exercise their land rights, or the fact that girls are unable to inherit property from their parents, these are mainly just problems. They are problems, and we are investing so much in solving a problem. But we are not investing so much in terms of uprooting this problem, dealing with the root causes of this problem. And the root cause is actually the social norms. And that's where I started this conversation from. It's the social norms that we hold in our communities, that many of us hold very strongly, many of us follow in our daily, ways of life. And once we do not deal with that, then it is very difficult, first and foremost, to translate these laws and policies into practice. Because you'll bring these statutory laws into a community that already has its own laws or its own norms or order of living in the society. So you bring, it's really conflicting in terms of, you have laws on one side, the Constitution is providing on one side, but we have also customary laws and norms on the other side that are taking on one side. And that is really a challenge for women. So we really need to deal with the root cause, with the real problem here. And this is the social norm. And social norm transformation, Simon alluded to that. In the land registration processes on customary land, one of the things that we have done in the issuance of certificates of customary ownership is to integrate social norm transformation approaches in the land rights registration process. So business is not being done as usual in the process of providing certificates of customary ownership. It's not like how the traditional titling processes have been, where no gender discussions are held, women are not engaged to understand what are their issues, what are their challenges, and also men themselves to, to interrogate some of these norms and understand where are they coming from, to have fear that a woman should be part of this title. Where does that come from? And how does it affect them as a man? How does it affect the family? So I think what has been very unique in this process of the certificates of customary ownership that is we have integrated social norm transformation approaches, and this has been done through, for example, engaging communities on issues around gender and women's land rights, and really having bold conversations around that, really to understand what are the norms that exist in this community. And many times we see that some of these traditions or the customs that we have are actually not bad, but they're just aspects within them that tend to discriminate against women. And once you have these conversations, open conversations, bold conversations in safe spaces within the community, involving men and women to have these bold conversations with traditional leaders, you'll see that themselves, they will say, okay, this aspect of the custom that we have doesn't seem to be working for the women. And therefore, we need to transform it. And it's possible to transform it. These are not norms that are cast in stones. They are changed over time with the way society changes and so forth. So we've had those conversations in the community. We have had conversations of men alone, but also conversations of women alone, and sometimes we bring them together. And in this process, we have seen that a number of these norms, for example, where land was not being passed on to girls, now we are seeing so many fathers saying, include my daughters on that title. They are actually the first on the list, even before the mother and the father. You know, all these changes are slow, but they are very, very critical, and it has to be a very deliberate action. If we don't do this deliberately, then it will be business as usual, and women and girls will be left out, because that's the norm. That is the normal that we know, that, you know, this thing is owned by men. Men are the ones who will be on the title. They are the ones that will make decisions, but that affects the woman and the girl in this family, because they will not invest in this, in developing this land if they do not feel that they have a stake, if you have not actually shown them that actually you recognize their contribution on this land. So the opening space to interrogate some of these norms has been very critical. We also have champions in the community. For example, the traditional leaders, like His Royal Highness Granny Stephen. We have these champions that are, many of them are men, of course, as you know, many of our chiefs are men. But you'll have them at the forefront, talking to women and men, telling them this is possible, this is change, there is good that comes from transforming some of these norms. And we see that because they listen to these people, because they trust these people, we are seeing a lot of transformation in some of those traditions. But also the men themselves, because they're the ones that benefit from these norms that discriminate against women. So engaging men, working with them as champions, and making sure that they themselves are, you know, making the changes in their households, and therefore others can see that when a man and woman are working together, they are including their children in this title, then they see that there's a lot of benefit that comes from that, and then it's, you know, it's a trickle effect. You see that others also borrow from that. You
mentioned something that most of the cultural leaders are men, and I could really see that the next conversation we could be having is having more women also clamor for these positions as cultural chiefs.
Yes, why not?
Gender equality, she couldn't resist. Let me also bring in His Royal Highness Granny Stephen. He is the paramount chief for the Madi community, Madi tribe, that is Jumani district and Moyo districts, and Obongi districts. So we would like to know, His Royal Highness.
The whole of Madi sub-region, but for some reason it's limited right now to those three districts.
Indeed.
But never mind.
So we would like to know what you are doing to ensure that women's rights on land are secured under the customary tenure.
Listen, first of all, we're actually working. We're on the ground. We're doing the changes. We're ensuring we're protecting. We're doing mediation. where in areas where we find the woman is being disenfranchised, we'll step in and stop this disenfranchisement. For example, I'll give you a close example. Close to me, myself, was mapping my uncle's land. There was some dispute about this young lady's land because her father, who died, who passed on, left only her as a girl, and she's got her kids. And then my uncle wanted to take over that land because it was my uncle's grandparents that had given this lady, his grandparents, the land or something like that. And basically was able to step in and stop that situation and have this lady tied to her land for herself. There's so many scenarios like that. There's widows that are left without no man to speak for them, and you ensure that their rights are protected and stuff like that. So basically the issue of women should not be any problem, because I'm telling you, the traditional leaders out there, listen, the women, let me tell you, these are the land belongs to these people. Listen, they do 80%, 80% of the socio-economic activities on land. 80%.
Of course.
In the whole nation, 80% is attributable to the women. And if 70% of our economy is agriculturally based, and women doing 80%, what is the contribution of men to our economy in Uganda? You have to ask yourself these questions. And if the land rights of women are not protected, then where does that leave the women? Because the society we are living in is increasingly selfish by nature, because the nature we are following is no longer customary, but it is colonial. It is colonial. Everything is colonial. The laws, the rules, even the lawyers, you say, that protect the other
Even the
tenure systems and stuff like that. Even the courts, all these are colonial stuff. You understand? But it will take I don't know what it will take to decolonize Africa and decongest Africa of this thing. Okay, we cannot totally decongest Africa and decolonize Africa of this, but because there are aspects of it that are needed, because we have moved into the modern era of doing business and stuff like that. So there are those things that are needed, but at the basic protection of human rights, the rights of women, the rights of children, it's the duty of these cultural leaders, traditional leaders, to step up to their calling. You understand? Because at the end of the day, if they don't step up to their calling, they're not worth their weight in.
Is it true that
paper.
if we do not secure the rights of the women, we shall not achieve National Development Plan 3?
We can't. We can't. How do we achieve it? Because most of the national development is done on land. The land of which, like I said before, 80% is done by women. Now, if the women have no rights, are we trying to turn our women into slaves? Are we trying to copy the colonial model?
Occupants.
You understand? So it doesn't work. We have to protect our African women. We have to value them in according to our customs, not the customs that has been coveted from another people's culture. This is our African culture. We need to go by our African culture and stop the coveting of other people's lives, other people's goods, and other people's whatsoever, and live and be an African and develop our own African model of our
what are some
economies.
of those challenges that are prevalent in our communities that make it so hard to ensure the realization or actualization of women's land rights under the customary tenure?
Let me give you an example. Right now, I'm not shooting down
but you're being factual, please go ahead.
But I'm being real. I'm being as real as it gets. Yeah, there's this World Bank loan for USMID, right? The USMID is something with local government and stuff like that, several local governments. And Jumani was included, and Moyo, because they're part of the people that deal with refugees and stuff like that, and Obongi. But the reality is that the World Bank loan was given for registering and titling freehold titles. You understand? In a place like Ajumani sub-region, for example, not Moyo, all these are places under my concern. But these places, now, how are you titling people for freehold? They have not even had a customary certificate of title, and you're there titling freehold. Blood, does it make sense?
It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense. And if this is what we are doing, as local governments and stuff. I think the best thing the World Bank can do is take back the loan and get the local governments to reconfigure so that that money goes to support customary land certification process.
Like UN Habitat and Global Land.
Exactly.
Yes.
They should not do what is alien to the customs and the culture of the people that use that land in according to their existence from time memorial.
Yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead. You were trying to give us factors that make it hard to actualize women's land rights in customary tenure.
Yeah, that's one. Okay. For example, that comes from a higher level
Indeed.
to a lower level. But the other factors are inhibition. You know, these men, I'll tell you what, when I leave the studio today, I'll go back home and there will be some man calling me and say, listen, land belongs to us. But let me tell you, something.
Indeed.
There's no man out there that can tell me land belongs to them. Bring me culture and tradition and customary fact to show that this land belongs to you, rather than for you to protect it for the use of women. You understand me? This is our tradition. This is our the culture. This is our customs. We have always protected women. They are always at the center, and we offer them protection. And so this attitude...
I never thought I would live to see the day I see a cultural leader actually putting the rights of women at the forefront.
Listen,
this
bro,
is really amazing.
Listen, let me tell you, this is the fact. This is the fact. Now, whether we go on pretending with colonized minds...
We shouldn't.
That is not my problem. Listen, while I'm alive, I'll try and do what I can to create the equity and the justice that was left by my forefathers.
Indeed.
And not this colonized system and to perpetuate a colonialism.
Of imposition.
Because if you lie to yourself, then the problem is not...
the people you're lying to, but you're lying to yourself.
It's you. You got a real problem, man.
Indeed.
And to jump out of that is very difficult.
What will it take to change the mindsets of all these men within our communities who feel like land belongs to only men and not women?
It's going to take a lot of dialogue. It's going to take a lot of sensitization when you're being real at the core of issues. The main problem that is causing men to do this is the issues of poverty, community poverty. But the reason why the presidents, including our great Yoweri Museveni, they went in 2009 and sat as heads of state, was for the eradication of poverty. Can we be a little bit patient to carry on through the process of customary registration, having customary land registries, and all these things, as we are doing now, going together with the Ministry of Lands and our partners, that GLTN, UN Habitat, and Makerere University, UCOBAG, and can we go slowly so we can achieve something that is sustainable and is for all people as our social norms dictate. Land was never a singular person thing. Number two, there's also a challenge in that the system or the tools, which is the policy or something, you know, as we continue to develop this thing, we are also evolving. And it also talks about the evolution of customary land tenure. But we are finding there are issues that were not thought of before that are creeping up.
Indeed.
For example, I told you about the registration of migrants and so on and so forth. Now, when it comes to protecting children's rights and women's rights, listen, the women we're talking about protecting, these are not women that live now only. You understand me? We have a saying that land belongs to the dead. We are the custodians of it as the living, and it also belongs to the unborn. You understand? So the issue is that now we give this land to these families and stuff like that. And a lot of them, because they can't afford school fees and stuff like that. And these are also, I'm sorry to say, that neo-colonial ways of taking the money out of the family economy because they're way overpriced and so on and so forth. We have just come out of wars in northern Uganda. We don't have the cattle. We don't have all these kind of things that we should have. Our normal economy was at ruin. But actually, northern Uganda is rich in many things. We could be contributing. We should not be depending on NOSAF, PRDP, and all those kind of things. We should be contributing to the national revenue pot rather than taking out. The issue is the poverty in people is not just in the minds and it's not just in the activities they do, but there's a poverty in culture. There's a poverty in not understanding that, listen, Just because you've been doing something for 50 years, it does not make it the thing that you should not have been doing. You understand? It does not make it a right. You understand? Because you have inherited it and stuff, it does not make it a right thing to do. The fact of the matter is, when all said and done, land is for all our living persons, whether men or women or children or disabled, or we have to protect them. We have to see that this land is protected for the future generations.
His Royal
Not just
Highness
now.
Stephen Drani, yes, he's the paramount chief for the Madi tribe. Let me also bring in Simon Peter Mwesije. He's a land tenure advisor working with the United Nations Human Settlement Program. We want to know what the development partners underwent during the two pilot projects, that is in Chisoro District and Adjumani District. Simon Peter Mwesije, would like to know what kind of challenges you encountered while you were executing those two projects in Chisoro District and Adjumani District, where you were trying to improve access to the to the customary land tenure system for the women. What are some of those challenges?
Thank you very much, moderator. Some of the challenges have been mentioned earlier, and one of them is that despite having in place the law for registration of customary land for a very long time, the implementation had been slow initially until around 2015, when pilots to implement registration of customary land started to take shape. So the issue is one of them is that the communities had little knowledge about customary land registration. And so it took a lot of time initially in implementing the pilot to engage the communities, to make them understand what customary land registration is, to make them understand how it is different from other conventional land registration processes that were highlighted earlier, but also more importantly, to explain to them how inclusive the process is, so that everybody in the community can actually benefit from the process. And so we found that much longer time than we had planned needed to be taken into consideration, but also the investment, financial resources needed to engage the community were much higher than we had anticipated. But once the communities were fully aware of what customary land registration process, they were very responsive. And as I mentioned earlier, it's been a successful process that has benefited both men and women that have participated. The second challenge that we have faced relates to capacity of the land administration institutions that are supposed to support the processes of registration. And here I'm talking about the area land committees, but also the district land boards, and also the recorder, who is the sub-county chief. So most of the required land administration institutions were in place, but had limited capacity in terms of the training that is needed to actually support customary land registration processes. But also, there was also the challenge that most of the area land committee members were illiterate and very elderly. And yet the process of registration requires them to be in the field, to walk around the land, and to make sure that the boundaries are well adjudicated. And so this was also very much a challenge. In regard to capacity building, we conducted a lot of trainings, and these were able to help the area land committees and the district land boards and the recorders to be able to support the processes. However, in areas where the pilots did not take place, this remains a challenge. There is also the challenge that As they mentioned earlier, the process of customary land registration is decentralized to the district. However, the district local government do not prioritize the land sector at that level. So they prioritize other sectors like education and health for obvious reasons. This leaves usually the district land office and the other land management institutions at local government with limited resources in order to be able to support these processes. So this is a challenge. I think that it's also a challenge for sustaining this process. In the interim, the development partners are able to subsidize and provide a budget for the land administration institutions to be able to support the processes. But this is a worry for sustaining and continuing the process. And the government really needs to look into adequate financing at local level for the land management institutions to be able to support the process. Thank you.
Mr. Mwesige, you've been in two jurisdictions, that is Chisoro District and Adjumani District. What will it take to cover the whole of Uganda, 149 districts? What do you need?
Thank you very much. Land registration, especially fast land registration, world over is a responsibility of government. Government, it's good that the government has put in place the necessary legal and policy framework to register land for all Ugandans so that their land rights are secured. Now what is remaining is for the land sector to be prioritized for funding and to be provided adequate budget to be able to carry out the legal and policy reforms that have been put in place. So the government, we hope, will be able to use the experiences and lessons learned from the different pilots that we have supported and to be able to develop a national program which will register all land rights for all Ugandans and ensure that Ugandans have secure land rights. And this will also be very helpful for other related processes, like, for instance, land use planning. The information that will be collected from this will be useful for nationwide land use planning and other plans of government. So I think that the government would have to take lead for it to be rolled out to cover everybody in the country. Thank you.
Simon Peter Mwesige is a land tenure advisor working with the United Nations Human Settlement Program, UN Habitat, and also Global Land Tool Network. Well, those are some of the development partners that expedited the pilot projects within Chisoro District and also Adjumani districts. Well, according to their survey that they conducted during that pilot project, many women actually came out in droves. So many women were actually coming out to register their land under the customary land tenure system. That is 80% of the people who are issued with certificates of customary ownership. Let me also bring in Professor Moses Musinguzi, the Dean School of the Built Environment, Makerere University, to talk about more issues to do with customary land. Professor Moses Musinguzi, let's talk about another issue. What will it take to ensure that all this land in Uganda, which is under customary, is actually registered under the customary land tenure system?
Thank you, moderator. As I've mentioned, one, we need to build capacity of the land institutions at the sub-county level so that they are able to guide the process and implement it. Then secondly, as Mr. Mwesige, Simon Peter from UN Habitat has mentioned, government needs to commit funds for the process to be done. The technologies are there and we have already tested them, so what is important is to now put effort into building capacity, and then we commit funds and everything.
Take us through the process of mapping this land before you get issued with the CCO. What happens?
The process.
Are we still using tapes and trying to ascertain where your land starts from, using natural factors like a stream, an anthill? Are we still using such models?
The process that we use is now even a simplified but participatory, inclusive process.
This is the fit for purpose technology.
It's also fit for purpose, but you see, before you register land, you must make sure that that land you are registering belongs to that person or community that you are registering it. And this is now unique under this program, because previously you would send a surveyor, and the surveyor goes maybe in the morning or at night, and finally somebody has a title. But here we go, engage the community, sensitize them, and prepare them. Then after that, we train a team which even includes people on ground, some representatives. We move with the LOC, we move with a member of the area land committee, and then we move with equipment. This is simple equipment. We use tablets, we use satellite imagery. And then the communities will be there, the neighbors will be there, and they show us the land, the extents. When they show us the extent, then we mark it using a satellite image, which is running on a tablet. Then we go around and map it. And when we finish the village, then we make a display. All the community members will come, because this image, the map has got an image which shows the features, houses, crops. Everybody will be able to go on the village map and identify their land. And they will verify that actually this is the land, this is the shape, and this is the location. And once we certify, then we go ahead and prepare the certificate of customary ownership.
All right. We also do have some feedback from social media as far as this conversation is concerned. I have Felix Obete. He's saying, as a land surveyor, I am now thinking that this approach of registration of customary tenure being completed at the sub-county level may help reduce the amount of money lost either officially or unofficially in bribes in the existing freehold, milo and leasehold procedures. And another one is coming in from Muja Judith, and Judith is saying, land committees have a big role to play in land registration. My concern is that these committee members can easily be compromised or bribed in performing their duties. Have you put in place measures to control such practices, such as providing adequate facilitation to them? Briefly, what are the control measures to this? Can you expand more on this question?
First of all, Mr. Obete, thank you very much. Yeah, this reduces corruption, of course, because this is totally under the control of the sub-county, and it is transparent. You cannot charge extra amount. So I agree with you, this reduces the corruption that is officially there.
It reduces the corruption, but then according to some experts, they say that it does not harmonize the data at the sub-county level. Like, we do not actually know how many CCOs have been issued at the sub-county level in the whole country.
Yeah, yes, right now we may not know, but as I mentioned before, this process of migrating these records from the sub-county to the National Land Information System will help us to know at the national level. But if you go to sub-county, you can tell how many parcels have been mapped in the sub-county.
Exactly.
The only thing is now the link between the sub-county and the National Land Information
Which
Center.
might take time, because out of those parcels we have only 1 million and we need 23 million.
Yes, exactly.
So by how long will it take for us to feed all this data, complete the registration, then feed it in the National Land Information System?
These parcels, when they are mapped at the sub-county level, they are there. So what remains is establish a link between the sub-county and the national level, so that all the parcels are reflected in the National Land Information System. So the second one was land committees can be compromised.
Yes, bribed.
In the pilot areas where we've been, I think land committees cannot be compromised, because you have the area land committee that is there. You have the member of the local council, LOC.
Yes.
Then we have another person, a local person, either that person is a land administration assistant or is a paralegal person, and they are there. So there is no way you can be compromised. And compromise might mean that my land is 1 acre, but make it 5 acres and extend into the neighbor's land. But remember, the neighbor is also there, and the neighbor is required to endorse. So how will the area land committee be compromised? I don't see that possibility.
All right. Go ahead.
What was the last question?
I think there were two only. Thank you very much, Professor Moses Musingisi. Let me also bring in Francis Birungi. She is the Executive Director at Uganda Community-Based Association for Women and Children's Welfare. So we'd like to know, from the perspective of your organization, how have you ensured that women and girls' land rights are protected?
Okay. I think for us, our business as an organization is really to ensure that women and girls' rights are protected. And what we are trying to do at organizational level is to ensure that these processes that are ongoing, the registration of customary land, for example, that it is gender responsive and men and women are benefiting and participating in the process equally. And one of the main areas that we are looking at is in the customary land registration process, to make sure that women are participating in all processes that Professor has talked about. They part of the people that are moving around when the demarcation is being done. Are they part of the sensitization events? Are they coming to the sensitization meetings? Are you having social transformation programs at household level with these families? So there is, for us, it's really to make sure that a gender responsive or gender transformative approach is integrated in the land registration process. So what we have done at organizational level is, first and foremost, to ensure that we increase women's participation in this process. So we mobilize women in the communities to participate in the sensitization events. We also make sure that the women know their rights. So we are doing a lot of awareness raising on radio, the local radio stations, informing them that these processes are ongoing in their communities. You have a right to participate and benefit from these processes. Please watch out, go, participate. It's your right to be there. So we are doing a lot of awareness raising for women. Also, further than that, like I mentioned, the social norm transformation work that we are doing. We are trying to make sure that the registration process is really gender transformative, in the sense that we are working with the households themselves, working with the wife and the husband in the home and the girls to interrogate some of these customs and be able to appreciate the benefits that come when all of us are included in these processes. So there is a lot that we are doing, and also monitoring and evaluation.
Indeed.
Yes, before any registration process is done in the areas that that Makerere is working, but also in the areas that we are working as UCOBAC, is that before any registration process is done, we do an evaluation to understand, first and foremost, are women, do they know what their rights are? Do they know that this is happening? What is the percentage of their participation? What is there in terms of women's participation? And then when these processes are ongoing, we do monitoring and evaluation to check and see whether women are actually participating, and if they are not, we try to come back to the table and see what is the problem. Why is it that women are not coming to the meetings? Indeed. Why is it that women are not participating? Why is it that the certificates are having only men? We had a case in Pader when the registration process was started, and all the applications that came in, there was a rush for application, but all the applications had men as the applicants. So that is something that we had to sit back and say, okay, why is it that men are the only ones that are applying for this CCO? Then we went back and said, okay, that means we need to do a lot of engagement. And I'm telling you, when we went back, all the certificates came back with their wives included, their daughters included, and that is cutting across all the districts where we are working. You mentioned 80% of women are benefiting from the CCOs.
Indeed.
The interest that women have to be included in these certificates of customary ownership is just amazing. Indeed. Because it really gives women confidence that they have a stake on this land. And we have seen that it has increased their confidence in terms of how much they invest on this land. Because just their name being there or their daughter being there means a lot.
It's big security for them.
It speaks a lot for women. So we think that many women really are happy to be part of this process. But the traditional registration, I emphasize, the traditional registration processes do not deliberately make sure that women are supported. Because we don't understand the fact that women will not participate if you do not support them too. Because our system does not provide us the space to be able to engage, to be able to participate and benefit from some of these processes. So what I like about the certificates of customary ownership process is that it deliberately makes sure that women and girls are participating in the processes as data collectors, as mapping teams,
Yes.
as the mediation committee members, but they're also included in the titles. So basically that is what our business is as an organization.
And of course, you've also been clamoring for a decentralized and simplified process in registration.
Of course,
Yes.
that is very central for us because we know that in the nature of us women, if you really put the processes very far from us, or if you make them very complex, we'll not participate. It will not be something that we may want to, because we know what the benefits are, but we shall not be motivated to. So I think the fact that the certificate of customary ownership or the registration of customary land really emphasizes simplification, making sure that we align the systems with the traditions and customs that exist. We do not do anything outside what the customs are, and also making sure that the services are brought closer to the people, so that women, already we have our traditional roles that are already burdened. You know, you have to take care of the children, you have to provide food, you have to cook, and then you're telling me you have to go to the district, or you have to go to the ministry zonal office, or you have to go to Kampala to register land. I mean, I will just give up and concentrate on my traditional roles. But if the process is brought closer to me, I know that my traditional chief can support me. My sub-county, which is very close by, I can go there after I have done my roles. I can still go there and have my title registered. I can go with my husband and we have this process done. Then it motivates women to participate. So simplifying the processes and bringing the processes closer to the people is very critical for women, for them to be able to benefit and participate in the processes.
Francis Birungi, also help us expand more on the correlation between securing land rights for the vulnerable, especially men, women, and the children, and food security in any given jurisdiction. The correlation.
Yes. You mentioned very rightly that women spend, and I think even our chief
80% of our women are in agriculture.
That yes, majority of women really are in agriculture, and we contribute a lot, a very big percentage, almost 80% to our, GDP. So, if really as a woman I do not feel that you appreciate my contribution by simply registering my rights and interest over this land, definitely I will not invest my time and energy on that land. Because if we don't do that, then women are going to invest less time, less energy in agriculture. They will not even adapt more modern technologies and other technologies that can be able to boost their production. Because after all, at the end of the day, if this relationship that I have with a man breaks, I know that I'm going to be sent away by my in-laws. After all, I know that if this relationship breaks with my husband, he's going to disinherit me and say, Madam, go, I have brought another madam, because I'm not protected by this piece of paper. Because I know that, any time I'm going to lose my rights over this land, because I am able to use, but there is nothing that confirms my right. Then if you don't have that confidence, you cannot. Even as, for example, if I'm not a rural woman, for example, myself, if I have a house in my home, and me and my husband, stay together, and I'm not included on that title, there is no way I'm going to bring my limited resources to even make a renovation in that house. I will not, because I'm not sure. I have no confidence that I will stay on this land. So it is very critical that women are part of this of these documents, because it will increase our investment and time and energy on land, and that will have an effect on the production, agriculture, and of course the economy.
And of course you have a viewer who is watching NTV Uganda and is wondering, what about the vulnerable man?
Yes.
Francis Birungi, what about the men?
Yes. When we talk
have
about...
you had stories about vulnerable men in those jurisdictions?
Yes. For sure, there are men that are vulnerable. And when we look at these processes, especially the registration of customary land, we are really looking at the poor in category, making sure that the poor are supported irrespective of their differences, whether they are men or women or youth, but the poor in that category. And we see that many men are actually poor, very poor. Though majority of the poor are women. So we see very many men that are really vulnerable, and in this process of registration of customary rights, really we make sure that everyone is included. Men, women, youth, people with disability. It's an inclusive process.
Right.
It even includes the men. But the traditional processes would not cater for the others. It would only look at the man, whether you're rich or poor or vulnerable. It is the man that owns. But this process makes sure that everyone that has a stake on this land is included on that title.
So we should all clamor for the formal process of registration of customary land. Let me also bring in His Royal Highness Stephen Drani. Would like to know from you, what kind of help do you need as cultural leaders to ensure to ensure that you secure rights for the vulnerable people, men, women, and children?
Well, first of all, yeah, thank you. That's a great question, and the kind of support that we really long for, I would long for, because I'm kind of in my community. I'm at the center of this, and I'm also pushing for it in the north with other institutions, and hence the uptake. But yeah, we would like to request for government to actualize the issues that are in the land policy. For example, on customary ownership, in 4.2 in the land policy says to strengthen traditional land management and administration institutions, government will take measures to 1, recognize and enforce decisions of traditional land management institutions by local government and state institutions. I'm grateful that in Germany there's unease, because we're really having to force ourselves in, but there's some kind of easing in these situations where we are all working. We have a greater working relationship with local government, and it says government shall take steps to measures to ensure full judicial backing for traditional institutions as mechanisms of first instance, and so on and so forth. But what I want to say is that we, as the traditional institutions, or the one that I'm ahead of in Madi, are also trying to progress, okay, and go ahead. But there are certain traditional institutions that are not endeavoring or showing progress. But I believe that traditional leaders, you cannot have certain skill. You understand me? You have to be taught those skills. So I would like also to request government to have some sort of course on this quality of equality in human dispute and or dispute resolution and stuff like that, taught to these traditional leaders, because a lot of them inherit this stuff that they haven't got a clue of.
I hear you very much when you speak about that.
So traditional leaders lack a lot of things, and so government, because traditional leaders and institutions are
as you clamor to sensitize the communities, even the leaders themselves have to be sensitized.
Exactly, that's what I mean. We listen. If the National Leadership Training Institution is for national leaders, all categories, then I believe cultural leaders should be the first ones to go.
His Royal Highness Drani Stephen, he is the Paramount Chief for the Madi community. Let's also bring in Simon Peter Mersije in this last minute to give us his concluding remarks. Simon Peter Mersije from the Development Partners, we want to get your concluding remarks before we close this conversation. Simon Peter, are you still with us? Concluding remarks.
Thank you very much.
Future projects in the pipeline, what are they?
Thank you very much for this engaging discussion. So I would like to thank the panelists for the discussion that is ongoing and for sharing the experiences from the different pilots for registration of customary land that have been implemented in different parts of Uganda. What we have learned is that it is not enough to have in place the necessary legal and policy framework. These have to be accompanied by by actions that enable institutions to implement the legal and policy framework.
All right, Simon Peter Mwesije, thank you very much. I'm afraid we've run out of time. We have NTV Akaungesi that shall be taking a center stage in 10 minutes from now. But thank you very much, Simon Peter Mwesije. He had his concluding remarks from the Development Partners United Nations Human Settlement Program Global Land Tool Network. We also did have Professor Moses Musinguzi, the Dean School of the Built Environment, Makerere University. That is Miss Birungi Francis. She is the Executive Director, Uganda Community-Based Association for Women and Children's Welfare. Drani Stephen, His Royal Highness Drani Stephen, he is the Paramount Chief for the Madi community. We couldn't get Naomi Kabande, the Acting Director Land Management from the Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development, maybe next time. My name is Romeo Busiku. Please, please, please go out there and register your land under the customary land tenure system. Get that CCO. It will give you protection. Good day.